send the barman over.
Yes, sir.
A dry martini. Wait. 3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of quinolile. Shake it over ice, and then add a thin slice of lemon peel.
That dialogue is from Casino Royale. Now, James Bond is high-octane action-adventure, and action-adventure is the genre that we're going to be talking about today.
Welcome to Writing at the Edge, where we explore the craft of storytelling and the business of publishing. I'm Jonathan Posner.
And I'm Keith Rossiter. Action-adventure is one of the oldest storytelling traditions. Think of Homer's Odyssey, or medieval knights in armor chasing the Holy Grail. Fast forward to the swashbuckling adventures of the Three Musketeers, or even further forward to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, or very modern young adult thrillers like Suzanne Collins's Hunger Games.
So at its heart, action-adventure is about movement, it's about danger, it's about the courage to face overwhelming odds. In today's episode, we'll be exploring the defining tropes of the genre and how you might structure your own novel and what readers expect when they pick up an action-adventure book.
And along the way, if I may, I'll bring in my own young adult novel, White Raven, which is an action-adventure story in which my main characters, Vijay and Marta, venture ultimately into an alternative universe.
So, action-adventure is really a hybrid genre. It combines physical action, fights, chases, escapes, with an adventurous journey through a strange or a dangerous territory. The adventure elements is what separates it from a straight thriller. Thrillers often stay urban and cerebral. Action-adventure stretches out into deserts, jungles, caves, or parallel worlds. It's about discovery as much as danger. And here's the key thing. Readers don't come to this genre for subtle interior monologues. They come for momentum. They want to feel the heart-pounding immediacy of danger, and they want to be transported somewhere where they've never been.
Most genres, including this one, have a few core tropes, the recurring elements in the story which the readers always expect. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Did you read that when you were a boy?
I probably did, but I don't remember now because it was a long time ago.
You didn't read it in bed, which is how he wrote it, apparently, lying in bed, in his sickbed.
Oh.
So that established many of the standard tropes in this genre. Maps with X marks the spot. One-legged pirates, swashbuckling jewels, all those perfect things that we expect in an action-adventure story. Jim Hawkins's, and this is really important, Jim Hawkins is the main character, and it's his journey from being the son of a humble innkeeper to being an adventurer who changes as he goes. So it's a combination of a coming-of-age story, and it laid the blueprint for later action-adventure.
So, aye, Jim lad. Well, so these are the tropes that you will find in almost every action-adventure story.
So the hero, we have to start with the hero, is often ordinary to begin with, but resourceful, brave, and of course flawed, because aren't we all, apart from you? Sometimes they're reluctant, but always someone you can end up rooting for. Think of Indiana Jones, the professor of archaeology who's terrified of snakes, or Lara Croft, the wealthy and educated heiress who is traumatized by early experiences.
Then there's the quest. Now, it's a goal, usually simple to state, but hard to achieve. It's about rescuing someone, or finding the treasure, or delivering a secret.
You need very often to have an exotic location of some sort. We're filming this in the lovely Duke of Cornwall Hotel in Plymouth, and it's a very old place, and many interesting people have passed through here on their transatlantic journeys, and one of those is was Ernest Shackleton, the famous Antarctic explorer, who I think probably is the epitome of the action adventure hero.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he was here, maybe in this very spot. Yeah. So you need a setting that will engage your readers. It might be a lost island. It might be a place like Venice in your Mary Fox story. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even outer space. It doesn't have to be science fiction to be outer space. It can be action adventure. And settings are often characters in their own right.
And it has to be high stakes. The quest has to matter. It's rarely just for personal glory. It's about survival, freedom, saving loved ones, or even saving the world.
I don't know about you, but I kind of love writing villains and antagonists because they're more, in a way, they're more fun.
They're much more interesting.
They're much more interesting, yeah. And your villain or your antagonist often mirrors the hero, but in a twisted way.
Well, of course, the villain is always the hero of his own or her own story.
Yes, absolutely.
So they always do things from their own, what they believe is the right thing to do.
Exactly.
And in their world, it is the right thing to do. But as the villain, we know that they're actually up against our hero, and therefore what they're doing is contrary to the hero's interests.
It's only Scooby-Doo where the villain is actually deliberately bad.
The janitor. It's always the janitor.
It's always the janitor, yeah. So your villain needs to be a mirror of your hero, but a twisted version, like in a carnival, where the hero is brave, the villain is ruthless. Where your hero is after knowledge, the villain is after power.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's the trials and the tests. So there are obstacles that escalate. A collapsing rope bridge, a betrayal, a riddle, or a storm even. And these are the things that become the spine of the narrative.
A lot of novels in this genre have a sidekick, a companion, who serves as one of many purposes, maybe to explain parts of the story that your reader doesn't know or is unlikely to know, maybe as comic relief. Think of a lot of these Disney children's films. They have a
Jiminy Cricket.
Yeah, comic relief.
Sebastian the Crab.
Yeah, but down to more serious fiction, we've got Sancho Panza in Don Quixote. And how about Stephen Maturin in Patrick O'Brien's Aubrey series of novels?
Yeah, and I mean, they often ground the hero, don't they?
They do,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you need action sequences. You need set pieces, daring escapes, chases, duels, stunts. These are what the readers anticipate and they remember.
Yeah. Earlier we mentioned the quest, the thing that they're after. So that can be the treasure or the prize. That can be a real object, money, gold, a relic of some sort, as in Indiana Jones films. It can be an abstract idea, knowledge, or self-knowledge even. This is what Hitchcock called the MacGuffin. I love that name, the MacGuffin. I don't know how it's derived. But this is a device or an event that is necessary for the story, necessary for the protagonist. But it isn't actually important in itself. It doesn't really matter. You can swap it out for something entirely different. Tell me about your Mary Fox novels, and we'll see if we can find the MacGuffin in that.
Well, Mary Fox has to return a stolen talisman called the Broken Sword, in order to break a curse and save the lives of a family, and also save their fortunes. So I think it's fairly clear that the MacGuffin in that book is the broken sword. But you're absolutely right; it could be anything.
Yeah.
The broken sword has a backstory as to why it has this significance. But yes, it could be anything. I chose the broken sword.
So, where does the hero go in an action adventure story? What happens? It's not just the plot.
Well, it's all about resolution and it's about growth. Crucially, the hero must be returned changed. They must be changed by the story. People love to see change and development, and that's what gives the story a lot of weight.
Our audience might be getting a bit nervous with all these various tropes, thinking, oh, how do I get all of this into one little novel? You don't have to use them all. Mix and match, choose what suits your story, and leave aside what doesn't. You don't have to have a one-legged pirate. That's not essential.
No.
Yeah.
Although I do have a one-eyed villain
Oh,
in the broken
that's
sword.
pretty
Yes.
close.
Yeah.
That's pretty close.
Bit of a trope,
A
but
bit of
yes.
a trope,
Yeah.
yeah. We don't have time to unpick every action adventure technique, but a very popular technique, one I used in White Raven, is the hero's journey.
Yep.
Before we break down these elements, let's take a little break.
So let's start with Act 1.
Okay.
And that is the call to adventure. Now, we start with the hero in their normal world. We understand their ordinary world, what's normal for them. Then we have something which disrupts their life, and that's the inciting incident. And our hero resists the inciting incident, but basically then accepts whatever the call is to action. So that is our Act 1.
And cast your mind back a few thousand years, if you were around then, to Homer. And it's exactly what happened then, resisting the call to come and fight at Troy, and eventually agreeing. So in Act 2, the journey begins. There are obstacles, there are allies. Of course, you need allies, we all do.
Mm-hmm.
There are set pieces, to hype up the danger. At the midpoint, something happens. Some event, some betrayal perhaps, a revelation, or maybe your protagonist is captured. But the emotional stakes of the story deepen.
And then we have Act 3. And Act 3 is the climax and the resolution. So our hero or our heroes have a final confrontation with the villain or the villains, and that, or maybe even with the ultimate challenge. If it's not actually a villain, it's something that they're challenged to do. They must use their inner strength as well as their outer skill. And victory comes, often bittersweet, and that's where we get the transformation.
If you don't mind, I'm going to use my novel White Raven again, because I wrote that consciously with the hero's journey in mind. So it begins with Vijay and Marta, the teenage protagonists, living as ordinary teenagers, basically, facing the usual teenage things, bullying, love, rivalry. But then there's the call to action, which is Vijay's grandmother is ill and they need to find a way to make her better. I won't reveal too much. And that leads them into an alternative universe. Once there, they meet all the dangers. As you can imagine, in an alternative universe, there are a few of those. Mm-hmm. They're tested in their loyalty to each other and in their bravery and their resourcefulness. But they come through in the end until they find the resolution of their problem. In other words, White Raven uses the timeless techniques and tropes of the action adventure genre.
Yeah.
Jonathan, which of your novels best illustrates the genre?
Well, we've mentioned briefly Mary Fox, and the Mary Fox adventures start with the broken sword. Now, Mary Fox is a girl who's been brought up essentially by her older brothers, and they've taught her how to fight with a sword. And so she's very handy with a sword. In fact, she's even better than they are at sword fighting. And when she's told by her wicked stepfather that she has to marry a horrible older man, she runs away. She then throws in her lot with a father and son that she meets on the road. And together they have to restore the family's fortunes by restoring the broken sword, which is, as I say, is a talisman that is cursed. And therefore, a little bit of it's set up as a little bit of sort of supernatural, but actually, everything that happens around the broken sword could be explained by natural phenomena for the modern reader. It's set in the Tudor period, so being told that you have to marry somebody for a family advantage was perfectly normal in those days. But then Mary Fox, as somebody who is, I think, relevant and understandable for the modern reader, pushes against that. And her adventures involve all sorts of sword fights and one-eyed villains. And it's one challenge after another that she has to face. And by the end of it, after the final climactic scene, she's really learned a lot about herself, and she's learned about how she is going to live the rest of her life.
So how might we go about writing it as a reader, as our audience might decide to choose this genre? How might they go about writing their own book? I'm going to read what I've written here because I don't want to get this wrong. There are certain things your readers will expect. And the thing about genre fiction is the fans of that genre do expect certain ideas. Use short chapters. Don't go on forever. Have cliffhangers, just like your soap operas. Quick turns, a sense of wonder. Transport them to a lost world, a secret temple, a hidden valley, the corridors of power if it's political adventure. Physicality. Let them feel the chase, the fight, the breathless escape.
And then, of course, there's the moral stakes. Courage, loyalty, sacrifice versus greed, betrayal and cowardice. Escapism. The reader wants to experience danger vicariously without ever leaving their armchair. And they need a relatable hero. Even if they're larger than life, the heroes must feel human. They bleed, they doubt, they fail. And that makes their courage real. And certainly with Mary Fox, I gave her a lot of doubts about her own bravery. But the more she does, the more she finds that she can do these things, the more she finds that she is actually braver than she originally thought she was.
Can I ask you a question about, in this genre, we're always throwing our heroes very sadistically up against trouble.
Yes.
Trouble. Do you think of the problem first or the solution first?
I absolutely think of the problem first.
Yep.
I put the poor girl into these awful situations. Actually, I don't know when she goes into the situation, I don't know how she's going to get out of it. But I like throwing her into these life or death situations and then sort of seeing where Mary herself finds a way out of it. And I think, genuinely, I think she absolutely hates me because I put her into these life or death situations every few pages, and the poor girl has to find a way out of them. And sometimes she'll think of something in a heartbeat. She'll come up with the answer in a heartbeat. But it actually took me, 3 hours of walking, pacing up and down, several digestive biscuits, and a few cups of coffee to come up with the answer. But it's really where she comes from. The more I write her, the more I understand her character and the more I understand how she will get out of these things. But it's always got to be believable. Yeah. It can't just be a Deus Ex Machina. It can't be somebody coming along and saying, "Oh, sorry," and switching off the whatever it is that's hurting her or whatever. That I'm sorry, that just doesn't work for me. It's got to come from her. It's got to come from her strength and her fortitude, her courage, and her ability to think on her feet.
Yeah, that's absolutely important. I think it feels more organic if you design the problem and let your character solve it.
Yes, as I say, she poor girl absolutely hates me.
Yeah. Well, one of the problems that you might have is a set piece, a big battle or some such. If you think of Lord of the Rings, it was there was the quest, but all the way along it was fight after fight
Yeah,
after fight,
yeah.
wasn't it? And those set pieces are what your readers expect. Um, you need to balance your action with bits of rest because it can get exhausting reading books like this, particularly if it's well written and it's just page after page after page of cliffhanger. You feel, oh my God, I'm totally emotionally drained. So just have some little periods of calm where your reader can begin to understand your character and how they think and feel.
Mhm.
So don't forget that. Use the setting again. We're back to the setting. The weather and the culture can generate conflict. What's really interesting, long before your protagonist and your antagonist meet, your protagonist can encounter challenges like they've got to climb a mountain before they even get to have that big fight. So remember to use those things, which it's not always 101, mano and mano. It can be man versus machine or man versus mountain.
And sorry if I can just jump in there. If you set the protagonist a challenge at the beginning of the story, then you're demonstrating where they are at that point in the story. So they may have not yet really worked out how they're going to meet these kind of challenges, but by putting them into a situation early on, it's a sort of save the cat kind of moment that gives them some an understanding, or gives the reader an understanding of how that person reacts in a difficult situation, which then sets them up for later on when you see how they react in more challenging or more higher stakes situations.
And we definitely need that early on, that reason to like our character.
Yes.
And not just a random person encountered on a busy day.
Exactly, and you really have to feel sympathy for them. You want them to succeed. And I was watching a series just recently where the challenges were very, very high, but I didn't really care about the characters, and so I've stopped watching.
Yeah.
Because which is obviously the TV equivalent of a did not finish. I just didn't really give much of a hoot whether or not those characters succeeded. They just didn't. They were too cardboard for me.
Yeah, it's often the way, isn't it? And the last thing to remember here is to ensure the transformation of your characters. We've said this before a couple of times. It's really important. If your character ends up exactly as they started, so why did we come on this journey?
Yeah.
You need your character to transform, to become better, to overcome their own personal flaws, to be a different person.
An interesting point there is we started this whole series, this whole event, with a James Bond scene. And actually, James Bond, certainly in the early books and films, didn't change. James Bond was the same person at the beginning as he was at the end, or the same person at the end as he was at the beginning. And it was actually everybody else around him that changed. But interestingly, that didn't really work anymore. When you got to Daniel Craig, it then became much clearer that you had to have development. So the James Bond that we have in Daniel Craig in Casino Royale is actually a very different person from the one that we see in No Time to Die at the very end. He has developed. He's become a lot more rounded as a character. And that, I think, was a really interesting development in the franchise. And just really one of those things that gave me a lot of thought as to how James Bond has changed.
That's a really good, interesting point. Do you think maybe readers have actually, or viewers, audiences in general, have matured? Because if you think of the early James Bond films, they were sort of quite like children's stories in a way, weren't they?
Yes.
And the modern ones are much more like stories written for adults.
Yeah.
And maybe as an audience, we have all matured a bit.
I think we have. I think we've grown and developed, and we look for more challenging narrative. And I think obviously we have changed in our social attitudes. So the old James Bond, who would sort of kill at will and then go to bed with the girl. That just doesn't cut it anymore. Now you want somebody who's a much more well-rounded and more developed character. And I think that's where Daniel Craig took the character, and with the scriptwriters, obviously, but took the character to a much, much better place.
He still kills at will, though.
He still kills at will, but it's less cartoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So, well, I mean, just really as a roundup point, action adventure is really evergreen. And it's interesting talking about, where James Bond has gone and how all of those things have developed. The actual genre is still very much a genre that people want to write in and people want to see on screen because it speaks to something fundamental. It's the human desire to leave behind our safety and our sort of normality and to face danger and ultimately to return wiser and better.
yeah, it's a timeless genre,
Yeah.
really, and it reflects all of our personal journeys as well. You go from being a child to a teenager to an adult. You're, in a sense, on this action adventure journey, aren't you? It's you're facing many of the challenges, many of the villains and
maybe not quite so much life and death, but certainly vicariously you want to experience that. Yeah. So whether or not your hero is wielding a sword or dodging a boulder, that's a trope, isn't it? The boulder coming down behind him, hacking through a jungle or stepping into another dimension. Remember, the true adventure is not in the treasure, in that sort of the broken sword, as it was in my case. It's in the transformation of your main character from the ordinary person facing a challenge to being somebody who is less ordinary and more able to cope.
Don't forget, tight pacing, imaginative settings, and courage and plotting. This will give you stories that leap off the page and that your readers can't stop reading.
Yeah. So
I'm Keith Rossler.
And I'm Jonathan Posner.
And we've been writing at the edge, and we hope you will enjoy writing in the action adventure genre. Now, next time we were debating what to follow this with in this genre series.
Well, we talked about a lot of different genres, but the one that really caught our attention, and we want to be able to explore more in more depth, is police procedurals.
Personally, I don't know enough about that, and I'm not about to start researching it, but it's incredibly popular on TV and in novels, and quite lucrative for some of its practitioners.
Yeah.
So if that takes your fancy, come along and to the next episode of Writing at the Edge. In the meantime, keep on writing at the edge.